Namaste. My name is Master Coach Yu, and my spiritual journey of awakening began in 1977 when I was 25 years old. And that's when I started deep diving to figure out why don't I feel safe in the world. The good news is that after decades passed, I came to realize that my karmic curse was also my dharmic blessing. Meaning, my egoic fear and insecurity drove me through its pain and suffering to co-create clinically proven psycho-spiritual coaching exercises. And this is why my transformational coaching school, where we certify people and have self-help courses and things like that, I'm actually the poster child. Now, the title of this video is 3 Core Elements Needed to Protect Your Boundaries, which are education, responsibility communication, and dispensing just enough yang energy. Okay, so let's elaborate on them for a minute. First, we'll begin with education. So almost everyone I've ever worked with since 1977, when it came to boundaries, they were illiterate. They might have had a PhD or an MD, but when it came to actually knowing how to protect their boundaries to the right degree, the right person, in the right manner, in the right way, they didn't know. And if you think about it, it's really kind of complex, because think about the different kinds of relationships that have different degrees of boundaries, right? Your boundaries with your children are different than your boundaries with your spouse, which is different than your boundaries with your coworkers, the boundaries with an authority person, let's say like if a cop pulls you over, et cetera, et cetera. Then you have emotional boundaries, psychological boundaries, financial boundaries. So most people are illiterate when it comes to boundaries. So the first step to do your inner boundary mastery work is you got to roll up your sleeves. And this is like a subject, just like if you never took algebra before or geometry or something like that. And I want to quote Swami Muktananda, which I'm paraphrasing somewhat to make it work here, but it's easy for a person of knowledge to obtain his or her objectives. Very difficult, though, for a person who is, in this case, boundary illiterate. Right, the second one is responsibility communication. And I can only highlight this because in a future video, the whole video is going to be about it. There's a lot to it. But this is just a very highly functional, emotionally mature communication technique. Think of it as a tool that you use to defend your boundaries of distance and intrusion when they're breached. When you learn how to communicate responsibly as a mature adult, you'll be able to teach people how to respect your boundaries, which will help you feel safe and secure in the world. This communication technique, like I said, will be explained in future videos. But the couple of things I want to go over right now, just little highlights from it that are important to cover right here, right now. The first one is that when, especially at the beginning, when you're working on becoming a professional at defending your boundaries to the right degree, right person, right manner, right way, is to observe the 72-hour rule. So let's say something happens and you're triggered, right? Emotionally triggered, you're upset. But sometimes I'm upset from an unconscious involuntary replication, meaning somebody does something and they're stepping on my toe and it hurts a little. But if they step on my toe and it hurts 24, 48, 72 hours later, most likely they stepped on my toe, which is a boundary violation, but my toe's infected from years and years of not healing something that might go all the way since childhood. So by observing the 72-hour rule, in around 72 hours, it's much easier to see if what you're working on is within you and a little boundary violation, or it was what it was, a major, minor, or anything in between. And that's why the 72-hour rule, which is the core of one of the cores, there's a lot to it, of responsibility communication is important. The other one is the LAD rule, which is an acronym for listen, acknowledge, and duplicate. Very important. So you're now 72 hours later, and let's say it's a friendly-ish, maybe it's a spouse or a good friend, and 72 hours have passed, and you want to tell your soul friend how you feel. Right? Not that they're broken, not that they're wrong, but something happened and you feel breached in one way or another, emotionally, psychologically, financially, it doesn't matter. So the LAD rule is first, The person listens, then they acknowledge, then they duplicate. Really, really important. And again, not going to go into it in too much detail, but listening is important, right? But when you listen to a person say to you, if they think you breached their boundaries, when you're listening, you don't always pick up everything that they're sharing, right? That your mind's drifting, defending, whatever. So duplication is really important. So the person shares how they were hurt, and they say, please duplicate. And what you do then is you share what you thought you heard. Now, duplication does not mean agreement. It could, but often it doesn't. It just means I really heard where you're coming from. Now, agreement or disagreement is another step. So you listen and you duplicate. Why? Because most times when people duplicate, they only get it about half right. So then the other person has the opportunity to add a little bit more to it. And then the person says, yeah, now you understand how I'm feeling, right? And then you do what? The other person does the same thing back again. So it's listen, acknowledge, and duplicate. I didn't focus on acknowledge, so let me go back to that. Acknowledge is I'm listening and I'm hearing you. I'm acknowledging you, and you have a right to feel what you're feeling. So again, in the future video, we'll spend much, much more time on it because there's a lot to it. The third element is dispensing just enough yang power. Now, here at Holistic Learning Center, we have a lot of different energy drills that we do, from vibrational transformation. There's just a lot to the quantum element of creating permanent behavioral change and changing neural pathways and things like that. But we have some simplistic ones too, just like the yin-yang or yes-no boundary exercises, where you practice dispensing the right amount of energy, right? Because think about words. If you said to somebody, I love you. I really do. I love you. Or if you said to somebody, I love you. I really love you. Those words were exactly the same. It was the vibration of the voice, right? The connotation that is anchored to the vibration. So it's not just the dispensing of energy, but what's the intention behind the energy? So this is a little scary right now, what I'm about to do. So you might want to back up from the microphone a little bit. But in the drill, think of how many ways you can tell somebody no. 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 Okay. So that was about 6 degrees of how much energy, yang energy, I'm putting into it. So let's get absurd here for a minute. So if I'm talking to a 3-year-old, right, and maybe they're touching something that they can cut themselves on or something, I don't use level 6. It would scare them to death. They'd start crying and running away. But conversely, if somebody is, that same 2-year-old is getting ready to walk into traffic, and maybe they're 25 feet away, I'm going to project as much energy as I can. So in your work with boundaries, a lot of it is vibrational energy, yang energy, just the right amount to the right degree to the right person in the right way. So that's the overview of the three core areas. So remember, boundary mastery skills teach you to always be willing to vote with your feet and leave when what you're experiencing isn't of light and love. So the first place of boundaries, right, is forget about all the technical stuff, is if somebody is violating your boundaries, see ya, I'm out of here, and you vote with your feet. Wait your 72 hours and go from there. In the next video, which is the last video in this series of 6 videos, I will share with you why healthy relationship boundaries require various amounts of openness. If you resonated with what I shared today, my Spiritual Life Coaching School, Holistic Learning Centers, has a free transformational course that covers things like this, where you can experience clinically proven psycho-spiritual coaching exercises that we've been developing since 1993. Or you can call the office at 888-HLC-0878, or visit the website, www.holisticlearningcenter.com. Namaste.